So, New York City may be the natural habitat of hipsters, hustlers, and dreamers, but have you ever thought of its connection with the natural world? Despite being a concrete jungle, this city is an ecosystem made up of all kinds of critters, many of which wouldn't immediately come to mind when you think of New York City's wildlife. So, today we're going to talk about a snippet of the wildlife in New York City and where you can find them. But before we start, I want to shout out the book that inspired this video and the corresponding blog post. This book is called Wild City and it's by Thomas Hynes. If you end up enjoying this video, which of course you will because I'm a darling, you'll also end up enjoying this book. Now, back to the wildlife. Beavers. It's not an overstatement to say that we would not be here in New York City without them. These buck-toothed rodents were the reason that Europeans set up shop on Manhattan Island. Unfortunately, it wasn't because they thought beavers were cute. It's because they thought they'd make a killing beavers and selling their pelts, which it was all the rage in Europe at the time. But by the 1800s, overhunting and overpolluting led to the beavers' disappearance from New York City's rivers. And it's only been a little over a decade since beavers have been spotted again in the Bronx River. According to Hynes, their return is a testament of the city's environmental improvements. And I actually saw a beaver the other day, though it was on the Hudson River Parkway, which is wildly unsafe for a beaver. It's a friggin' highway. I just hope that beaver made its way back to the river. Oysters. When you think of quintessential New York foods, you think of pizza and bagels. But for a long time, oysters were actually New York's go-to food. They were cheap, delicious, and abundant, so everyone ate them. But since we could never have nice things, New Yorkers ruined the oyster beds through overharvesting and polluting the waters. Duh. Today, through the efforts of the Billion Oyster Project, we're regrowing our oyster reefs. But those days of slurping on an oyster as you stroll down the street, they're long gone. Rats. Want to hear something mind-boggling? There are more rats in New York City than there are residents of Manhattan. We shouldn't be too surprised that rats have proliferated to such extreme numbers. They have been a feature of the city since its earliest days. Besides, New York has never had the reputation of being the cleanest city, which is perfect for rats. They thrive off of our trash. But don't expect to see streams of rats running through the streets, at least not usually. Rats are the masters of hide and seek. You'll likely spot them on the filthy tracks of the subway, struggling to carry a discarded slice of pizza, or if you kick a trash bag late at night. But don't do that. Monk parrots. There are a lot of cool things about Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery, but it being a haven for monk parrots has got to be near the top of the list. No one is exactly sure how these bright green birds made their way to New York from Argentina, let alone to Greenwood Cemetery, but they've been nesting in the gates and the spires of the cemetery for nearly 50 years. Try to spot them on your own or join one of these parrot safaris that they have. Alligators. Yeah, alligators. I know. When you think about alligators, you probably picture them in the Everglades of Florida or somewhere, not in the sewers of New York City. But I kid you not. That's where the city's first alligator was spotted back in 1935. It was a cold February day. A few boys were shoveling snow into a manhole in East Harlem, as one does, and they realized that an honest-to-God alligator was in the sewer beneath them. So logically, they got some rope, pulled the alligator out, and beat it to death. There are no photos of this sewer alligator, but the New York Times did report on it, and there were a lot of neighborhood witnesses, so the story may not have been a tall tale. But if you need even more proof about the city's legendary alligator population, our most recent alligator sighting was in 2015 in Manhattan. So they're still out there. Mandarin ducks. Now, a Mandarin duck is not an ordinary duck. It's a hot duck, at least to us New Yorkers. You see, back in the fall of 2018, this duck suddenly appeared in the waters of Central Park, and New Yorkers lost their jaded minds. If you're used to seeing flashier, colorful birds on a daily basis, it's probably hard for you to understand why a single Mandarin duck became the obsession of New York for a few months. like it was all over the news. But we don't normally see that type of coloring on a bird here. This duck's plumage stood out like someone in a rainbow coat amidst the typical sea of black coats in the wintertime in New York. Maybe you'll see it again next fall in Central Park. Pigeons. Remember how I said there were more rats in New York City than people in Manhattan? If you thought that number was high, you might want to sit down before I tell you the estimated pigeon population. It's 4 million. That's nearly half of New York City's human population. But if you think about it, it makes sense. Pigeons are everywhere in New York. Although their natural habitats are rocky cliffs, pigeons have adapted to roosting on building ledges and eating our discarded food to survive. Personally, I think that the pigeon hate is a little overblown. Yes, pigeons are dirty and they carry diseases, but you can say that about everyone that lives in the city. At the end of the day, pigeons are just doves with darker coloring. Think about that the next time you see them waddling down the street. And last but not least, starlings. Pigeons aren't the only type of bird that you'll see in great numbers in New York. Quite frequently, you'll also see these dark, bespeckled birds with shiny feathers. Those birds are called starlings, and they are New York City immigrants with an interesting backstory. Back in 1890, dozens of these birds were brought over from Europe by this Shakespeare superfan and amateur ornithologist named Eugene Schieffelin. Apparently, he thought that releasing all the birds Shakespeare mentioned in his works would class up the place or something. It's hard to say how much of that plan succeeded, as the starlings were the only species he released that survived. And survive is an understatement. Starlings have multiplied, with 200 million of them now spread across North America. If you thought that story was wild and you want to learn more about New York City's wildlife and its ecosystem, check out Wild City. I think it's a great read, and it has beautiful illustrations and a ton of information, and it's hella funny. But before you go, if you like this video, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to build a community of New York City nerds. And if you like this YouTube channel, you'll probably also like my blog. I have over 100 articles there about New York City history, culture, and things to do. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.